You're listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast, discussing all aspects of precision and long-range rifle shooting. And now, over to your hosts.
Hello and welcome to the Precision Shooting Podcast. My name is Rusty. Back with me again, Greg and Andrew.
Hello.
Greg there and Andrew here.
It's an audio podcast, Sam. They can't actually see you except for the people watching us.
What I was trying to do is in the last episode I said Andrew and Greg and then you both spoke and we may have confused listeners, particularly those new to the show, who was who initially. So that's why I was saying here in terms of the audio reel, I'm explaining it too much.
Yeah. Greg,
Move on.
Greg's the one with the very golden voice. I'm the one that sounds like a homeless person.
Thanks for
Andrew,
that.
This is an audio medium. They can't actually see you, so it can be challenging to...
Except for
sound
Patreons.
like a homeless person.
Patreons get an opportunity.
Patreon supporters
Poor
watching.
buggers.
We are actually recording this immediately after recording the last one. Fancy tech world that we live in. And the reason we're doing that is because the last one went on too much about other stuff. So we're not going to cover any particular news apart from, thanks to our Patreons. Hello, Patreons who are watching. We are in the process of upgrading some stuff. So we have a new microphone coming that the man with the golden tonsils will probably be trying out first. So thanks very much. And that hopefully will be a good little upgrade. And if that one goes well, then we will, over time, buy another couple. So just did want to say thanks to the Patreon supporters who are staring at us, some of them, and making comments about Texas anal or something or other.
Jeez. The fist.
The fist. Listen to episode 93 for some references there, and maybe some more clarity around that, because your mind could be completely elsewhere if this is your first episode. Welcome for listening. Thanks for joining us. It's not as dirty as you think, or maybe it is. And I've forgotten what we're talking about, Patreon supporters. So the money that those guys have been chipping in is going to, you'll be seeing it both live and then also hearing it hopefully improved, so your homeless voice will sound less homeless, Andrew.
Sweet. I sound like just semi-homeless.
And Greg's Kermit voice will sound more like Miss Piggy.
That's very nice. I'm quite offended by that.
Good. That's what I'm here for. Cool. So moving on quickly. Actions. Actions is what we didn't cover in the last episode. So for those bringing up to speed, I am wanting to build a new rifle based around precision rifle shooting. About to start a new club, and we're also about to, hopefully being able to shoot a PRS match maybe next year rather than having always been involved in running them. Which would be nice. So we put out an episode, and we talked about calibers, and we ended up residing with the 6.5 Creedmoor until something else comes along. And then we put out the request for information about what actions people are using. Right, I think we're up to speed now. Actions.
Right, we're on topic.
We're on topic. Go.
It has been a little interesting. I've been following just in the last couple of days, at least today, the
last day or so.
The conversation, yeah. And
there's some reference for you if you like.
Okay, well, what you put up originally was what do you use, what do you like, what would you change? Now you put up Impact Precision, Curtis Custom, Manil, Defiance, Surgeon, Bighorn, any others you suggest.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting conversations here. People have put in, quite a few suggestions. Some with reason, some without.
Do you have to thank our listeners for jumping on Facebook and commenting on these things to be able to sort of give us their thoughts and stuff? Greg, there's one for you, mate.
Thank you.
Passing iPads around,
There was a comment, just trying to find it.
Did you break it already, Greg?
Yeah. Fat fingers, mate.
Michael Stubborn.
That's best comment, I think.
Made the comment: if we wait 5 minutes, there'll be another new action on the market. I'll take that one until we know. Until then, will you?
He's a Queenslander, mate. Doesn't always make sense.
Maybe he ran that through the translator as well. Interesting point, though. There are a lot of options on the market. So it kind of got me thinking a bit.
What have you used previously, Andrew? You've probably got the most experience around actions and bits and pieces.
Yeah, but not necessarily for this purpose.
Sure. Yep.
I've got 3 Stiller Spectre action rifles currently. That are the main ones I'm running.
Yep.
I like them, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily the best on the market. I haven't found fault with them.
Yep.
But then again, I haven't really been big into this sort of shooting. Now, the reason what sort of pushed me to go to them was a couple of reasons. They got integral rail.
Yes.
They're not integral recoil lug, but the recoil lugs are pinned, so it sort of takes a bit of that out of it.
Yep.
They're an octagonal action, which doesn't really mean a lot either way. But
is there any benefits to those sort of shaped actions, or not?
Not necessarily.
Debatable.
It's probably there's a little bit more material in the action, I guess, than if it was round.
Yep.
Maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked into the specifics of technically if there are any reasons why they'd be better than a round action.
Sure.
But they are cut, or the short action ones are cut for AW magazines, a double stack AI mags.
This Pirate Life beer is good.
Mm.
Anyway, sorry. Just wanted to make mention of that.
It is a good Pirate Life beer. So that, that I like the fact of being able to use magazines that aren't 8 inches long that stick halfway out of your gun and drag on the ground. So for me, that was a fairly big reason to go with them.
Sure.
But again, once a lot of these actions I haven't actually played with. Like reports are very good, and I think with modern machining techniques, it's easier and easier to produce an action that is fantastic tolerances and fit and finish and that sort of thing. So, I mean, again, like the deadline by Ultimatum Precision, which someone's mentioned here, I had heard of Ultimatum, but I hadn't seen that particular action. I looked that up today and it looks nice.
Yeah, I know when I spoke to John, 8541 Tactical, he made mention of the ultimatums, and particularly the new ones. He said the older ones were a cheaper model and were okay, but the new ones are really top spec and really good, and he was a big fan of them. So certainly worth looking at. And it's one of those things I'm not sure we're about to decide tonight, but I think a lot of this stuff does come down to Mick's comment probably sums it up well in terms of that there are that many good actions, like the list I've written up the top there, plus ones that others have mentioned, the impacts, the Curtis Custom, Manil, Defiant, Surgeon, Bighorn. Any of them is going to shoot really well. Probably that Ultimatum as well. The AI has been mentioned as well. Badger, M2013. There's a number in there, and they're all going to shoot really well. So it's just coming down to some of those like additional features and bits and pieces that are worth, and which ones you like the feel of, and that's the downside of not being able to go and play with all of these unless I wait until January for SHOT Show.
You probably, after playing with them all, you'll probably still walk away not
more
convinced either, specifically on one or the other.
Because an action without being in a gun, without ammo and bits and pieces doesn't necessarily...
Yeah. I mean, look, I haven't handled one either, but the Bighorn, is it the TL3?
I think that's the one. Yep.
It looks good in that, there's a number of features like the floating bolt head and that sort of thing, which if you were to go down that line of wanting to be switch caliber, it would give you that versatility. You could run a 223 on it. You wouldn't have to get a whole new bolt. You just run a different bolt head. That would add versatility, I guess.
That's the Curtis Custom, which Paul Reed raves about and is running currently, and talks about the ability, effectively the switch barrel, and then I guess
it's not just switch barrel within the same family of cartridges. It's switch barrel
with the same bolt across anything. So that's a really significant benefit, I think, because that was one of the original sort of specs of this build was to be able to switch that barrel out.
So is that a long action?
No, short.
Short.
Well, I imagine they do a long action as well.
Yeah, but with a switch like the bolt head, you can change over. Basically, will give you versatility to go from a 223 or 204, 17 rem, that sort of size, up to a 375 WSM. A WSM based thing, just with nothing more than a change of the bolt head, I would presume.
Yep.
That would just, to me, that
it's a fair bit of scope.
Yeah, it adds versatility over having to run a bolt, say on even their Stillers. If you want to, you could run a different bolt.
Well, this is what crossed my mind when we were in Sydney Shot Expo with Svigna Nick from Ignition Custom about the manure actions and setups, and he had a switch barrel set up sitting there, and it was running 2 bolts, and being able to swap between a 2 to 3 bolt and 308 bolt, and that sort of the bolt faces anyway. Being able to do that with the different bolts sort of reduced that. Now I guess there's a high cost in doing that, isn't there?
Yeah, generally speaking, yeah. I mean, that's the thing.
Unless
I
Nick's
guess
donating that second bolt. But anyway.
doubtful. But, I mean, yeah, look, that is. And
Pirate Life beer is real good.
It's lubricating the podcast. I mean, yes, any gun, you can run it with a switch bolt.
Sure.
And that's always been an option.
Yep.
I guess, with a bolt head that's removable and interchangeable, it doesn't take away from the fact that you still need to carry the extra bolt heads and whatnot to do that.
Yeah.
And I would presume the cost would be less than a whole bolt.
Yep.
I don't imagine it would still be cheap, but it would probably still be less than having to buy a $400 or $500 bolt.
True. I guess that the thing for me though, it's I'm only going to have to buy one other bolt. It's only one. I'm not looking at an array. I'm looking at a 2 to 3 sort of size and a 308 sort of size. So even if it's a few extra $100 to get an extra bolt, it's probably not. It's neither here nor there. I don't want to cut corners because I have to. If I prefer one action over the other, because of that, I'll get the other bolt.
Well, I mean, I think if that was to be the case, then that's probably not the deciding factor in your choice. It would be the features like how smooth is it, what's the bolt lift like? Are they really heavy to cock? Are they got a big long bolt throw on them, or are they a shorter bolt throw? And all those things would come into it. I mean, I guess you've got to narrow down what you sort of view as important in that regard. Because if you were to go, I need a 60-degree bolt throw instead of a 90-degree, that immediately cuts out a substantial number of possibilities.
Sure.
So it depends what you want it to do.
Absolutely. So I think looking through a couple of things, I've always been a big fan of Defiance, and that's not just because Greg owns the company. The Defiance always were for me a bit of a benchmark, and I had always heard. Sorry.
Why is that?
I don't know. I don't know why. Perhaps it's the guys at that particular time who were running them and bits and pieces like that. Perhaps it's just like that. But they were good and playing with them. They looked sensational, and they just seemed to be a really good quality action they were well thought out. One of the comments that I had heard about them is that they bind up. In poor conditions, they can bind up dirt and grit and bits and pieces like that. And I'd never seen it until the second day of the last PRS, when it was wet and rainy and dirty and muddy and all this sort of thing. And I did notice a few of the Defiances start to be a bit tougher to close and cycle. It wasn't prohibitive of them being run in the comp by any stretch, but it was a factor.
Yeah, and look, I guess it's always going to be a compromise to a degree of having this amazingly slick, tight action and something that's going to work in those adverse conditions. So,
and that's where it's not they don't do that because they're bad. They actually do it because they're really good. Their tolerances are super tight, which has that drawback. So it's a benefit. But knowing we shoot a PRS match no matter what, and pretty much, and unless it was dangerous. But there was mud flying everywhere that day. It was wonderful, but only because I was ROing and didn't have to line it. And so that's probably the main thing. The impact precision I really like, and I've shot that, but I just found as you lock that up, as you sort of close that bolt, there's just this little extra click notch sort of thing as you closing the bolt, and I thought, maybe that's just me noticing that. But then I was speaking to another PRS shooter in the States, and he said, that's the reason I didn't jump on it. And again, there's no reflection of the action. The action shot. I mean, that gunner shot really, really, really well. And Greg Small's got a couple of them coming, or at least one of them coming, and they're really nice action to run. But just that little thing was not my cup of tea. So I'm a little bit unsure about that. The benefit with that is that the guy who builds those guns builds really good quality barrels. Builds chambers really good quality barrels, and he will chamber a barrel up to your spec on the other side of the world and just send it out to you. and you know it'll just do it up, and away you go. You rock and roll. So, barrels done for a long time is taken care of pretty well. So that's they all sort of seem to have their benefits and such. So the surgeon actions, they've probably been the one that's been the benchmark for me for a long time. They've just been around a long time, always been sort of top shelf. Yeah,
look, I have played with surgeons a fair bit, certainly in comparison to the other ones on that list there. And I said for the 3 that I built for myself, I built them on the Stiller Spectres.
Yep.
This is sort of certainly no reflection on what they might be doing now, but I actually thought the Stillers were certainly finished better than the surgeons at that time.
Yeah.
And obviously very similar kind of design in the 2-lug, effectively the Remington style bolt. And for me, I thought, I thought the Stillers were finished a little better, and I thought other than that, I didn't see the integral recoil lug as being as big a deal as the integral rail.
Yep.
Because with a pinned lug, it doesn't matter.
You still have that opinion? No.
Yeah. Look, for switch barrel guns and things like that, if your recoil lug's not pinned, then yes, you'd need some sort of jig to locate it when you're tightening barrels and whatnot.
Yep.
Not a big deal when it's a pinned lug. So, for me, it came down to, I slightly prefer the Stiller in the finish.
Mm-hmm.
Effectively, they did exactly the same thing. And, the Stiller was a bit cheaper. And had they been the same price, I think I still would have gone the Stiller.
Okay. Yep.
But again, I said I'm not a PRS shooter. I'm more of a field hunting, long-range hunting sort of thing. So
Stiller's got a new owner now, as well, as far as I got told the other
I've heard whispers about that,
Something's changed, and I think they've gone, because I think they did they did sort of just stay static for a bit and produce really good stuff, but just they were static in producing that good stuff without really
pushing different designs and whatnot.
Innovating a lot, which I think some of the other brands we mentioned are really good at innovating and being sort of right on the edge of it. Defiance is probably one of the best at really doing that. The Bighorns, I know a few of them have been floating around here, and they've been performing really well. I know Mick, who said there's an action every 5 minutes. He's been running them, and Scott Patel been running them, and they look really good, and they've got that ability to swap the bolt face out. So they're high on my list for that reason. I see the Curtis Customs are actually coming into Australia, and someone's bringing them in, and I can't remember who it was, but whoever it is, I'm curious. I'd love to be able to get hands on one, have a little look at one. So hopefully if someone's shooting a PRS match and you've got a Curtis Custom and you're willing to let me have a look at it, that would be amazing, because if Paul Reed's in on it, it's worth looking at, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, the issue, or another issue, I guess, with some of these actions could be parts availability. If you do need a new extractor or a new ejector or something with the action, what kind of difficulties you're going to have in getting one of them?
That's a fair point.
But I mean, the same could go for anything, because although Stillers are bought into Australia by a couple of people, they probably don't carry a lot of spare parts and that sort of thing. So
that probably brings us on to Menil then, which is the locally made here in Adelaide, and there's got to be something said for that locally made, locally supported. And I have, so as I mentioned, either in this episode or the one before that, one of them was on the prize table at the last PRS, and we got to, just a heads up, one of the ROs won it, one of the stage officers. So if you're interested in stage officering at a particular at a PRS,
you will win a Menil action.
Andrew's promised to give you a Menil action, but from a PRS point of view, the ROs win some killer prizes, which is really good. So massive thanks to Nick for putting that out there. But being able to play with that action for quite a while, I did like it. It impressed me, perhaps even more than I thought it was going to. So the bolt knob was extended and was really comfortable to use. So it seemed really really well finished and nice to play with. Very smooth.
I haven't actually had an in-depth look at one of those. I mean, okay. I know Nick quite well, and I had a look at one sort of in the prototyping stage, but it was sort of a fleeting glance. So I'd have to have a good look at them. But I mean, I certainly would hope that they're to that standard that people actually seriously look at them as an option.
I know Scott Patel is bailing on his bighorns after the next PRS match and to go to a Manil because he wants to sort of put together as many Australian components as possible. So Manil being the action for that. So it will be interesting to see how Scott goes with it and how that sort of whole kit performs. Which would be excellent. What were you looking up there, Greg? You were checking something out?
I actually went on the Precision Shooting blog to see whether they had released what the pros used in terms of actions.
Yep.
But it's still the one from April last year.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, just having a look. Yes.
Some of that data hadn't come out yet.
No,
because
I haven't seen anything since April.
Defiance was probably top of that list.
Yeah. And for the three the 3 previous years, but they were in many different configurations of Defiance.
Maybe that's, Andrew, where my benchmark has come from, is Defiance being on that
Probably.
precision rifle.
And the fact that you want to support Greg.
Well, I'm not really that fussed about that. One of
Don't affect my share price. No, that's joking.
There's a couple of interesting comments that came through on the Facebook as well for other actions. One was the Adler, so thanks for suggesting that.
That was a worthwhile comment.
Gave me a chuckle. And Barnard actions. Barnard action, which are traditionally like a F-class
target shooting.
Target. Are they used in bench rest?
Not bench rest, like as in short range bench rest, but
they're used
popular
for
in F-class, yeah.
All that sort of thing. Yeah.
I think there were some comments I followed briefly because they do a repeater action that is effectively a Remington footprint. It's similar to a Remington footprint.
Yeah, well, that's my first question is do they do a repeater? Because I knew they
they
most
do.
of singles.
They do. It is different apparently. It's not.
Okay.
It does require a bit of work to fit it into a Rem inlet.
Sure. I've got a hammer.
Yep, and a chisel. You'll be right.
Sweet.
And some super glue. You'll be good.
I've even got a Dremel. We could.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
it is does require a bit of work. Now I haven't actually handled one, so I can't tell you what they're like. I have played with a few Barnards. I've actually got one in a single shot rifle and a bigger long range gun, but it's very much and the speed is not the of the essence. It's a single shot, very big heavy gun, but I guess if someone was to have some personal experience with the repeater, it would be interesting to hear. But to be honest, I'm not sure that. Well, the Barnards are renowned for being pretty close tolerances. I'm not sure how they would handle being abused, dirty.
Yeah.
They might be okay, but
because I'm just reading some comments here from Jason Myers, who I know has got good experience with the Barnards, but again, and he said that they can handle dirt and grit and stuff as well. So it would be interesting to see. And he's building a PRS based gun on a Barnard action, so that'll be interesting to see how that goes because traditionally it doesn't sort of sit in that space. But there's no reason you couldn't.
But you also got to look at Barnard are made in New Zealand. They don't have a huge presence in the US. So it's probably not overly surprising that they're not overly represented in the PRS scene. It doesn't mean they're not capable of it. It just means there's availability, I guess.
Yeah, and that's probably a fair point. Is availability is a big thing with a lot of these ones. The other one I saw there was the GA Precision Tempest.
Yep.
Now GA Precision were using, if I get this right, we're using rebranded Defiance ones or branded Defiance ones. I think they are building their own actions as well as now to complement the range. But that's a 60-degree bolt throw with a 3-lug action. But again, availability here I think is more challenging. And I'm not looking to sort of import a one-off over from the States. I'm really looking at supporting a local distributor to be able to get it from, to be able to get some support from if needed as well. So that would be the ideal way to do it. If I'm importing, otherwise, if I'm picking up something locally, then even better.
So I guess the summary of the action discussion would have to be that you haven't made your mind up.
No, I think you're right. The other one that was a common thread was the AIs. to go with an AI. Now, obviously, to go with an AI effectively means running a AI rifle all out. And someone said, oh, you've ruled out factory type guns, but I really recommend an AI. I don't reckon I ruled it out. I don't really remember what we did in the last episode. That was only half hour ago. So,
Got a couple of Pirate Life beers ago.
good beers actually. But I think the AI route doesn't give me a lot of flexibility in my options. In the additional options in stocks and chassis and that sort of things, which I really do sort of like. I have run an AI in a comp and it went really well. And I've got no specific complaints about it to make, apart from the fact that it is what it is and it's sucked like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I guess I do like to tinker and play with and maybe change this and do that a bit more than the AI will really be allowed to let me do. It does have the benefit of switch barrels easily and bits and pieces like that. So, yeah. Speaking of that, she's unrelated completely, but wanted to make mention of our latest sponsor, and do so by telling you my favourite cigar story. I'm sure you guys have cigar stories. We'll save them for another episode.
Probably a couple of them can't be repeated, but yeah.
As I said, we can always said in previous episodes we can always beep them and just let the Patreon listen.
I'm not sure you want the Patrons listening to that.
Oh, no value for the Patreon supporters. Anyway, my favourite cigar story, because we're about to talk about Puro Trader, and they do like cigar auction and trading website, which I've called the eBay of cigar the world, but I'm not sure if that's correct. Anyone will tell us off if it isn't. My favourite cigar story was we were up for New Year's Eve. We used to do this traditional thing. We'd be up in the Murray River. And for those who are familiar with the Riverland in South Australia, that's where you grew up, isn't it, Andrew?
It's been a good part of my growing up, yeah.
And so we were on the river. Mate's got some property up there. And we would literally be metres from the water and we'd camp there and everything there. And one of the evenings, I think we had the clay thrower with us. No, actually, this is where my real interest in clay throwing years and years and years ago kicked in. And I had my shotgun with me, which wasn't a very good one at the time, side by side, CVC. And they said, oh, we might do some clay throwing tonight. I went, oh, that sounds interesting. I've never really tried that. And so the bloke was an electrician, and so he drove a van out into the middle of a paddock and connected this whopping great floodlight up. And so we had this huge floodlight. They were using white clays. And so these things like stood out really, really well in this huge big light. And yeah, so first time trying clays, and I hit a few of them. But the exciting part of the night, apart from shooting clays, was shooting clays with a big fat cigar hanging out the side of the mouth. And I felt in a bit that night. It was wonderful. I did hit a few and did also finish the cigar off. So I'm sure I've got a photo from there from years ago, but I'm not sure I'm willing to put that up. That was pre-beard days, you know. And so, speaking of cigars, as we referenced, mentioned Puro Trader, who have jumped on board to support our podcast, which was very nice of them. And it is wonderful if you guys are looking for a rare or hard-to-find cigar, or even a cigar at a really good price. There are, you can go to shops and online and bits and pieces, but probably the best place is purotrader.com, because what it will allow you to do is to sell or buy cigars from other cigar aficionados, and you can grab some information in their forums from their various other cigar aficionados and collectors and retail shops and everything along those lines. So there's really good prices and stuff, and it covers the entire world. So you can buy cigars. If you have a particular one you're trying to track down that you can find from a bloke in London, the Puro Trader website can coordinate that deal for you and get it on its way over to you as well. Or if you just want to try and find good cigars locally without a huge freight cost, and they're fairly cheap, that's another good way to do it. It's always much more convenient to buy online. What was the last thing you bought online, Greg, that you're willing to commit to?
A bivvy bag.
Yeah. Turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, actually.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Andrew, have you bought anything online recently?
Not that I'm prepared to share on air.
Prophylactic.
Nice. So buying online is pretty safe, and particularly with Puro Trader because you can use PayPal, which gives you fairly good confidence as well. So you can jump on there and have a look around at all the cigars. The website, actually, should let you know. So when you buy it, there's a small fee for Puro Trader, and that is what you can save some money on by using our code at purotrader.com. Chuck in the promo code
PSP1.
That's it, Andrew, for 25% off the Puro Trader fee. That's purotrader.com and use promo code
PSP1
for 25% off that Puro Trader fee. So you're right, Andrew. I am struggling to decide which action to go, and I'm not sure of the next step because I think that this is something that a lot of people fall in the trap of is trying to work out which is the perfect action.
Yeah, I don't think the perfect action exists because if it did, everyone would use it. You get guys that are using all this variety of actions and love them and wouldn't want to use anything else. So I think ultimately you probably need to narrow down your parameters a little bit if you have or are able to do so at this stage. It would then rule out options, I guess.
Well, I think my big thing is being able to swap those barrels out, and that's where the Vector and the Bighorn are two of the forerunners. I've got to say they probably really are. The Manil as well, if I can get a good deal on that second bolt, will come into that equation well. But what I might do is I'm going to get Nick to probably build the gun anyway, so I might head down to Nick and have a chat with him about those actions, but about like how that switch barrel side of things would work and what we can sort of work out with that side of things. And if we get some fruit from that, then wonderful. If not, I might hit up Paul Reed about those Curtis Customs. It would be really interesting to find out more about that or the Bighorns. And I think I'll pick Mick or Scotty's brains about Bighorns, which way to go. So there you go. I've just narrowed it down to 3. And probably now it's going to be coming down a little bit to cost, availability, and a little bit of reference from those side of things. So I think the way I've got there is, you're right, Andrew, prioritising some of those other factors and deciding that the switch barrel is a really big thing for me. We've covered the AI platform still sits in the back of my mind as well. I'm not completely ruling it out, but I think I've mentioned a few things as to why I'm not sure I'm quite committed to it there. Which I think will become more apparent when we get onto the chassis or stock scenario as well. So that being sort of top of mind, I'll give the Manils a go because, being local, I don't mind supporting that side of things. But we'll see what these Curtis Customs and Bighorns are like. Do want to say thanks to all the guys who did jump on and give us some suggestions. I do particularly like Ben Jarrett again, comes through with the goods.
He certainly explains his view, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's probably one worth mentioning. He talks about running a Surgeon 591 and he's a big fan. And said if you were going with a standard fixed barrel, recommend Surgeon or Defiance based on the advice of his gunsmith, but also many, many people running those actions. If you want to run a switch barrel setup for training comp, then you need to use an action with interchangeable bolt heads. Unless you want to
bolts.
Yeah, pay for another bolt with a different head size. Be interesting to know the dollar. I'll do some research and find out what the dollar variation is on that. If I haven't done it yet and someone knows who is importing the Curtis Custom actions, please let me know who that is. Big on the Ultimatum apparently does that as well. I don't know. The Ultimatum hasn't quite been on my radar.
Maybe it should go there now.
Should it go on the radar? All right. All right. So now I've expanded it back out to 4. But I guess the action is the big thing you interact with a lot, and it's really the thing that you want to get familiar with. So, there's been there's so many options, and again, as Mick said, something else will come out in the next week. Something new will come out shortly. So, the action debate continues, and then we get on to barrels. Barrels, the next step.
Probably.
Do you have a similar take on barrels that they're all pretty bloody good and just pick the one you can get that makes the right setup for you?
Not necessarily. I think it's a little more detailed than that.
Good. because then we can't knock it off in the next 3 minutes.
No.
Good.
No.
I look forward to Andrew's wisdom on that, actually, because I guess we've got to take into account barrel length as a factor. And a few
Length
other
is an
bits.
important factor.
Yeah, very. I found that out with my
That's
build.
just-
Couldn't quite reach the second node.
Oh, yeah, very
I
good
kicked
point.
myself in the butt with that one, and
Mm.
I just made it in the end with a bit of smarts out of quick load. Is it quick load?
Yeah.
Quick load.
Mm.
So
And you ruined the twist
yeah.
rate as well.
No, I didn't ruin it. They changed.
Burger ruined it.
Burger ruined it. I blame Burger.
Yeah.
Blame Litz.
Fair enough. Excellent. Well, I think that was all the ones that was suggested. Guys, if you got a moment, you want to read through some of those comments and suggestions, I would suggest jumping on the Facebook and from Precision Shooting Podcast and having a little look at some of the information that guys have deposited there. Still up in the air about which action to go with. Interesting to get everyone's feedback on it, and I think we've narrowed it down a little bit. I'm pretty set in my way about being able to have some switch barrel options, which is interesting because I wasn't really a big fan of switch barrels probably a couple of months ago, so I do see an opportunity for it. So we'll see how we go. Easy.
Sounds good.
And yeah, big thanks to Puro Trader and to Pirate Life as well for giving us something to entertain ourselves during the podcast.
Legends.
Top stuff. All right, guys, we shall see you in a few weeks. And what have I got? I'm off to Melbourne tomorrow morning. Great.
Yeah, more driving.
More driving. That's
Sucks
what
to be
we do.
you.
That's right. I'll just listen to our podcast. That won't be out.
That'll put you to sleep, and then while you're driving.
Oh, yeah, that thing. Check out the Dollet podcast. Good one.
Thanks for listening to the Precision Shooting Podcast. To continue the discussion, check out our Facebook page. And for more information, head to our website, www.precisionshootingpodcast.com.au.